Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I very much welcome the opportunity to speak at the second reading of the Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill, a bill that addresses one of the most defining national security challenges of our age, and we've heard many valuable contributions from honourable and right honourable members across this House so far today. Before entering Parliament, Madam Deputy Speaker, I spent several years working to protect our country from cyber risks. My background in software engineering gave me a rare view under the bonnet of the systems that now underpin almost every aspect of our daily lives. I saw firsthand how our digital infrastructure works and just how vulnerable much of it remains. I really loved that work, and I'm proud to say that as a country we are genuine world leaders. But I would be dishonest if I said that it did not leave me deeply worried at times. Not because of any single threat or actor, but because of the sheer scale, complexity and relentlessness of the cyber risk we face. Those risks are only accelerating with advances in artificial intelligence, automation and the advent of quantum computing. These technologies, as we've heard today, will revolutionise our lives in ways that we are only just beginning to understand, and we must adapt alongside them if we are to remain a serious technological and economic power. Our lives are now dependent on the digital systems at every level, from water treatment plants and electricity networks to transport, financial markets, healthcare and the wider economy. And I think it's fair to say that we are no longer merely supported by digital infrastructure, we are built upon it. And when those systems fail, the consequences are not abstract, they are immediate, they are human, and they can be devastating. And we've already seen that reality play out in this country. We cast our mind back to May 2017, the WannaCry ransomware attack tore through the National Health Service. Tens of thousands of computers were infected, staff were locked out of patient records, diagnostic systems and telephony. Ambulances were diverted, thousands of appointments and operations were cancelled, including urgent cancer referrals. At the time, the estimated cost to the NHS was 92 million, but the human cost, the stress, the disruption, the loss of confidence cannot be measured in pounds and pence. And the crucial point, and we've heard this from contributions today, the attack was not targeted at the NHS, but the NHS was particularly vulnerable because it was reliant on outdated and unpacked systems and the fragmented digital assets it owned. It was a warning shot that should never be forgotten. More recently, the private sector has faced similar sobering lessons. Capita very recently was fined 14 million following a cyber attack that compromised the data of more than 6 million people. British Airways and Marriott International suffered major breaches affecting hundreds of thousands of customers, resulting in substantial penalties and lasting reputational damage. These were not small firms. They were sophisticated organisations with scale, expertise and resources, and yet they were still exposed. That is why this bill matters and why I want to work constructively with the government to ensure we get it right first time, and crucially that we build the ability to adapt and update this framework as the technology and threats continue to evolve, whilst referring to the point made by my right honourable friend, the Hertzmere, not making this burdensome on businesses and organisations. As the UK's first piece of legislation to include cybersecurity in its title, the Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill represents an important step forward. It modernises the Network and Information Systems framework, brings new sectors into scope, including data centres, managed service providers and critical suppliers, strengthening incident reporting requirements, enhances enforcement powers and allows government to act decisively, I hope, where national security is at risk. I welcome these objectives, in particular recognising that managed service providers and supply chains are now critical attack vectors, and that is an absolutely correct point. Cyber threats do not respect organisational boundaries, and our regulatory framework must reflect that reality. However, Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill must not be treated as some sort of elixir. Cybersecurity is not solved by regulation alone. While the bill strengthens protections for critical national infrastructure, it leaves significant questions unanswered. Questions we must address if we are serious about national resilience. One of the most pressing concerns raised by industry is the growing complexity of incident reporting. Organisations already face overlapping obligations under data protection law, sector-specific regulation and soon economy-wide ransomware reporting requirements. As that, multiple voluntary reporting channels and the landscape becomes fragmented and very confusing. And having been a small business owner before, when you are dealing with marketing, advertising, payments for staff, it becomes almost a difficult position to be in when you're having to have these extra layers and complexity with reporting added on. The first hours of a cyber incident are chaotic. Systems are down, decisions are time critical, staff are under immense pressure, and forcing organisations to navigate multiple reporting regimes in that moment risks distracting them from the most important task, which is, as we all know, containing the attack and restoring services. A unified reporting framework with a single point of contact and aligned timelines would reduce burdens on businesses whilst improving the quality of information available to government. This bill should move us closer to that outcome, not further away from it. And I look forward to the next passage of this bill to working with government to ensure that happens. We must also be honest about the limits of sector-based regulation, and the Minister referred to this in his opening remarks. While the bill focuses rightly on critical national infrastructure, many of the most damaging attacks in recent years have occurred outside its scope. Manufacturing, retail and consumer services have been heavily targeted, and the attack on Jaguar Land Rover, as it's been referred to by many honourable and right honourable members today, estimated to have caused up to £2 billion in economic damage across the company and its supply chain, is a stark example. And I want to put this point on record that I'm also deeply concerned about the precedent being set when the British taxpayer is effectively required to act as an insurer of last resort for major companies that have failed to adequately defend themselves. For large firms that are critical to our economy, the expectation that the public will step in cannot become the norm. Responsibility must sit squarely with the boards and executives to invest properly in cybersecurity resilience or face the consequences. And I am glad to see that the government have made the initial steps to having that conversation with industry. At the same time, small and medium-sized enterprises, which make up the vast majority of our economy, are particularly exposed. They often lack the skills, budgets and capacity to implement proportionate cyber defences, yet they sit deep within the critical supply chains. As a single weak link can have cascading consequences far beyond the organisation directly attacked. If cybersecurity is economic security, and I think we all agree that it is, we need a whole economy approach. That means combining regulation with incentives, support and standards that uplift resilience across the UK PLC, not just at the very top. This should include stronger secure by design requirement for technology products, embedded through procurement and standards, and practical, accessible support for smaller businesses, potentially including considerations of a national first responder model to help small firms recover quickly from cyber attacks. We must also address the skills challenges head-on. Cyber skills shortages are already undermining resilience and compliance, and regulators themselves, if we are to give them more powers to investigate these things, will need additional technical and enforcement capacity to deliver the expanded responsibility set out in this bill. That capacity cannot be assumed. It must be planned for, funded and developed far in advance. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to raise the issue of cybercrime law. The Computer Misuse Act dates back to the 1990s, a time when fewer than 1% of the population had access to the internet. Its blanket prohibition on unauthorised access fails to distinguish between malicious attackers and legitimate cybersecurity professionals acting in the public's interest. Now that matters. Vulnerability research and threat intelligence are essential to defending our systems, yet many professionals in that industry operate in a legal grey area where carrying out work that ultimately strengthens our national security. Updating that framework, including introducing protections for reasonable research, would modernise the law without weakening it. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, the bill is an important foundation. It strengthens protections for critical services and sends a clear signal that cybersecurity is a core responsibility of a modern state. But legislation alone will not deliver that resilience. That requires coordination, clarity, capability and sustained investment, and an honest understanding of where this bill must be strengthened as it moves through Parliament. Cyber threats do not stand still, and neither can we. And I support the direction of travel set out in this bill, and I urge the government to engage constructively as it progresses, so that we can deliver a framework that provides real, lasting protections for our country and our economy and the British citizens.